fuel. All right, let's move on, get to Konrad's Car Clinic now, shall we?
So, yeah, we're going to talk today about cold air intakes. You know, we've been talking about engines as air pumps and how they work. You know, many of factory production cars had cold air intakes. One of the original ones was this one, which was on the Z11 409 in the Chevy Impala. And
She's
Bel
real
Airs.
fine, my 409.
Yeah. Well, they actually pulled the cold air from the base of the windshield, the cowl intake, and that's a factory air intake on that. So, you know, and then the evolution of it as it went through years, that one was 63. Here's a 66 cold air intake, and those big tubes that are coming out of the side, that's on an Oldsmobile W30.
Of course it is.
Tri-power, that's got 3 2-barrel carburetors.
Nice.
And those big tubes actually went to scoops that were mounted under the front bumper. And that's what brought the cold air in. That intake, that air cleaner right there is probably about a $3,000 air cleaner today. So if anybody's got one in their trunk, keep it. And then they evolved.
Or on their engine.
Yeah, this is a 68 and 69, the W31.
I love the gold engine.
Well, the gold at Oldsmobile meant it was a 350. You know, Oldsmobile 455s were blue, the 425s were red, and the 400 was a bronze color. So when you pop the hood of an Oldsmobile, if the engine's still the original color, visually you should be able to tell what size engine is in it.
Interesting.
And then they went from that in 68 and 69, and in 70 they offered this. Now this is what fits underneath those 2 big snorkel hood scoops. And if you look right in the center of that, there's kind of like a little butterfly flap that has a vacuum hose going to it. When the engine would go wide open throttle, that vacuum hose would lose its vacuum, and that flap would open up and would allow the hood scoops to ram air into the intake manifold. Pretty cool operation. And that's what's on my Rally 350. And then Pontiac also did it with their Ram Air 3 and Ram Air 4s through the hood scoops that dumped right into the intake manifold. But it wasn't just the performance cars. You know, even some of the everyday stuff would have cold air intakes on them from the factory. This next one is off of a Chevrolet pickup truck from the 90s. And instead of going to the cowl of the windshield, they just collected air from behind the headlight out of the fender area because they didn't want that hot air in the engine compartment to get into the engine. They wanted to kind of keep some colder air coming in. And then in the early 2000s, they changed to this kind of an intake manifold. Now, this still
What the hell is that?
Well, this still
looks like some sort of a gun.
Yeah, well, it's still dumped over to the a port in the fender to draw the air in. But you see all those weird little tubes and chambers. Those weird little tubes and chambers were designed to to eliminate the harmonic noise, the droning noise that could be created by an air intake tube. You know, we were talking off the air before about how when we were kids, you just flip the air cleaner on your carburetor and you'd hear that noise. Well, manufacturers didn't want that noise. So they put all these extra tubes and chambers.
We want the noise
to kind of counterphase that noise, right? And then you talked about your Corvette. Next one is an air box that again takes air from the fender and dumps it into a cold air box. That's an aftermarket air box. And then the Corvette would pull air from in front of the radiator, again, looking for an area that the air wasn't already heated. Because hot air has a negative impact on performance. Cold air is more dense and has more oxygen in it, hence cold air intakes.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Yeah,
But the horsepower increases were relatively minuscule. People that advertise, we can get you 15 horsepower with a cold air intake. Put it on a dyno. I don't think that
I always had a fascination and love for the look of the cowl induction from Chevrolet with the little flap up on the hood.
Well, and that's like I showed you on the Oldsmobile, that little flap is under the hood. With that little flap, they were taking the air from that high pressure area right at the base of the windshield and the hood. And that's why that cowl induction flap would open up. When that would open up, that would push air into the air cleaner.
That's great stuff. You didn't talk about the air filters.
No.
And the K&N, I've discovered, has less restriction than, say, for instance, a Fram filter that you would get at Walmart.
Yeah, and I'll do that next week. That measures the micron of what allows the air to go through. The problem with that is the larger the micron, the more debris can get through.
Yeah,
so the way K&N gets around it is their filters have an oil on them. But we'll talk about that next week.
Okay, let's do it next week.